This is Regina from Well and Grace. Before I begin today's episode, I want to offer a gentle trigger warning. This conversation includes discussions about domestic abuse, trauma, and recovery, which may be difficult or emotional for some listeners. Please take care while listening and feel free to pause and return when you feel ready. If you or someone you know needs support, please seek help from a trusted resource or reach out to abuserecovery.org for biblically based recovery options. Now let's begin today's important and grace-filled conversation. Thank you.
And grace for every heart, refreshing souls are set apart. Come to the well, receive His life, living water, endless life.
Welcome to today's episode of Well and Grace. I'm your host, Regina Bartlett, and today we have the honor of speaking with a remarkable leader in the field of abuse recovery and faith-based healing. Joining us is Stacey Womack, the founder and executive director of Abuse Recovery Ministry and Services, ARMS. With over 27 years of dedicated service, Stacy has been a beacon of hope for countless individuals affected by various forms of abuse, including emotional, physical, spiritual, and sexual abuse. Her unwavering commitment to supporting both survivors and perpetrators through faith-based programs has led to transformative healing and the restoration of healthy relationships. Whether you're a faith leader, community member, survivor, or ally, this conversation promises to offer valuable insights and practical steps towards fostering healing and resilience within our communities. So let's welcome Stacey Womack to the show. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Well and Grace. I have to say, when I started researching your company and the work that you do, I was unbelievably amazed at the depth and breadth of the things that you provide and how this ministry has been absolutely transformative to people. And I can't wait to get into it because this is a topic that I think is very prevalent, sadly, but also maybe not as talked about as it probably should be. And introducing how faith can work wonders in the lives of people. And I love how it's not just, the survivors that are able to seek help through you, but how you're also able to help perpetrators is something that I would also like to get into discussing today. Okay?
Yeah,
Excellent. So why don't you share a little bit about who you are, your background, and how you got to this space now?
sure. So my story is a little bit unique in that I was raised in church. My father was a pastor, and I met my husband very young, and we married young, and started having babies right away. So I have 6 children, and I was homeschooling him back in the day when that was kind of a newer thing, and that was really my ministry. I felt very called to that, and then in the midst of that, God began to speak to me about ministry beyond my family. And I didn't really know what He wanted me to do. I just knew that He had called me. And so I spent a couple of years seeking God about what it was He wanted me to do. And through a series of crazy events, this was a door He opened. So I always tell people that this has always been God's idea. It was never my idea. I would never have sought it out or picked it. And yet, and honestly, Regina, my only goal when I started was to lead a couple groups to help women through their healing process from abuse after I learned how to do that. I had no intention of starting a nonprofit. I had no intention of it becoming this national, international organization that it's become. I've just kind of kept my head down and kept working. And I often joke that the only thing that's really extraordinary about me is that I keep getting up each morning and showing up. Yeah. So here we are today and doing great work.
That's incredible. And I think it speaks to obedience, where when God puts something on you that may not be, like you said, what you chose or what you would have chosen for yourself, but to receive that and be willing to take those steps and make those moves is incredible. And it allows, God to do the work that He does. And look at what God has done with I'm going to start a couple of groups and look at how God has made this absolutely incredible. So faith has played a role in shaping what you do in your ministry. How has that been met when you're speaking with people who have been victims of abuse and sometimes may have a struggling relationship with God?
it's not uncommon for our women that we've served who've suffered from abuse to have that happen because, well, clergy are the number one place people go for help. They've also been the least helpful. And I don't think it's because they're not caring people. I think it's because they aren't educated around this issue and they don't understand it well. And they often just assume it's normal marital conflict. So I have hundreds and hundreds of women who've told me, Stacy, I love God, but I hate church. And so because the church that should have been safe for them, should have been a haven for them, was not.
Yes.
And so they not only are experience abuse from their partner, but also from their faith community. And if they do take steps, set up boundaries to end the abuse, oftentimes they lose their entire faith community in the process. So, I just think that that's not God's intent. I don't think people view domestic abuse as really oppression. That's really what it is. And the Bible has a whole lot to say about oppression.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Certainly, the reality is that, like less than 9% of counselors receive domestic violence training. Like a full 40 hours is what's
really
industry standard. Church pastors, seminaries should be offering a full 40 hours of training. And all social work organizations should be requiring a 40-hour training. And they don't. They get maybe 2 hours if they're lucky. So we offer that training so that we can at least give them that information so they can better serve. Unfortunately, even counselors think that they're prepared because they're all trauma informed. So they think that that's enough, but it's not. Domestic abuse is different than normal relationship conflict, and it has to be dealt with completely differently.
Do you think that there's a way that like what's the way to push that forward, to make that
requirement
that go forward? Yes. How do we make that requirement across all of these different areas, especially if people are conflating trauma informed, with domestic abuse help, and they're not the same? How do we bridge that gap?
Well, that's something that we've been trying to do for a long time. I have people who are friends or colleagues who are licensed counselors at PhDs, and they say it's a slow moving barge. And I would say that in the faith community, it's pretty much the same. And a lot of times I think the faith community doesn't want to believe that it's that big a deal, or maybe they don't want to believe that it exists at all within our churches, but it does. And so, I've spoken at a couple of seminaries, and it's, mostly men usually. And I can just see the off switches. It's off when I'm speaking to them. Like they have already decided that what I have to say isn't going to be valuable for them. Sometimes it's helpful. I know this sounds horrible, but if I have my husband with me, I have more credibility when I speak about these things to other men. And of course, there's some change in this. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, but the change has been fairly minor. And I would really love to see pastors have some education. They don't have to have all the answers. Being a daughter of a pastor, I understand that pastors get asked to do all kinds of things.
Oh, yes.
And way more than they can do. And they don't need to do all those things. So all I want to do is give them just enough training so that they can recognize it and then know where to send them. They don't have to be the experts in it. And they need to know what's in their community, but also that we're a resource to come alongside them that is faith-based. But they can also build partnerships with secular organizations and be a light to the world that way by listening to them, even letting them train them, and helping them. That's kind of how we got some of our credibility in an area that's actually considered very liberal. That part of our credibility was built through me saying, come train us, come teach us what you know.
Yeah.
And that was really, really helpful. So I've written a really little book. It's only like 100 pages long. It's for the faith community, and it gives helps for the community, for those who experience abuse, those who are using abuse, and for church leaders and pastors. And it's such a great book that just kind of, if they can't go to a full training, but they need enough information to kind of help them get moving forward. It's just a tool. It's called On the Front Lines of Abuse: Strategies for the Faith Community.
I think that's great. And I think that, taking that step to help faith communities break the silence and stigma that falls around domestic violence. And I think
Yeah.
that you're doing a fantastic job in facilitating that, and creating resources that people are able to, on their own. That's the great thing
Mhm.
about a book, is that it's something that they can get
Right.
and on their own kind of go through it and know that
Right.
there's an avenue now that they can pursue
Mhm.
for their congregation. I think that's wonderful.
Or if they want the full 40 hours, we offer that online too. So they can,
Oh, that's
they
great.
can go through it that way too. So,
My goodness. Okay.
yeah.
We're going to chat about that. So what do you think in the faith-based communities? What are some of the major misconceptions about abuse?
I think that the misconceptions around like who is doing the abusing, who are the abused, oftentimes it's thought to be the lower class, the homeless, the drug addicted. And the reality is that it's an equal opportunity offender. So 53% is the middle class, and the rest is split between the lower and upper class. So that's the entire society.
Wow.
And so we often, another misconception, it's not happening in the church, when in reality, it's just as happening just as often in the church as it is outside of, but victims don't talk about it. And women who are experiencing abuse would not call themselves victims. They
Right.
often themselves see it as normal marriage conflict and are trying to fix it that way, but it never works. So they may try multiple counselors when couples counseling is not the correct approach to dealing with this issue. But I have women, I think every woman I've worked with has just about tried counseling. Some have tried as many
Yeah.
as 15 counselors. So, but it doesn't work because that's not the answer when the issue is about power and control. It's not about normal marital conflict.
Right. Right.
So, helping them to understand that. But, I think that barrier in the church of thinking this isn't happening here because no one's talking about it is actually a misnomer. I myself, as I began this work and starting in my own church, I kept telling myself, stop being so shocked when another woman from my church comes up and tells me privately this is going on. And they look like the perfect family. They are involved in our church.
Yeah.
They are on the church council. They are helping with Sunday school and VBS and everything else that's going on out there. And, we live in a broken world. And so we all suffer the same issues, whether we're in the church or outside the church. And there's no shame in that. We just need to
It's
be
so true.
honest about it, right? We don't go to church because we're perfect. We go there because we need to get help, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I speak to a lot of women's groups, and my work is generally around just creating cultures of vulnerability within your congregation, because to me, church should be the safest place for women on the planet. And I find that we get so caught up in our Sunday finds of just like, how are you? Fine, fine. We see each other on Sunday and everything's great. But we live in a broken world and we're all suffering with our own certain levels. But we get into this place where we should be able to open and we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really damaging. People fear judgment, all these things that we know that we are not supposed to be, that we would extend to others so quickly. We are so guarded and so fearful
Yeah.
for ourselves in those moments. So how can you, like, what's a way that, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a normal person, one of your girlfriends, if you see something that you suspect may be not normal marital conflict, but kind of pushing into another realm, what can we do? What should we do?
Well, the first thing is, you should not bring it up in public. Definitely not in front of the other person. That puts her in danger. And you might privately just tell her, I think that behavior that they just did is abusive. And they may argue with you and they may be angry at you, but you planted a seed. I know one woman who said that someone told her in the kitchen that her husband, what he said to her was abusive, and she got so angry, but that began her journey forward. And again, because nobody wants to say, well, I'm a victim of abuse.
Right.
Nobody wants to say that. It doesn't make you weak. It's not your fault if somebody else is choosing to use abusive words or abusive behaviors towards you. And abuse just means a misuse of. So
Yeah.
whether they're misusing words or finances or sex or the Bible or property, and we have 8 different categories that we talk about of types of abuse. And it's just a misuse of. And we want these women to understand that because they're valuable, that it's not okay for this to be happening. And that's what we do in our Her Journey recovery program, is just to help walk them through that process of not just knowing, because a lot of us who've gone to church have known for a long time that we have value, but we don't believe it.
That's
So
true.
we want them to move from a place of head knowledge to heart knowledge, because when you believe that you are valuable and that you're worthy, then you will set boundaries and you will say no to the abuse. And we watch these women do this. We watch them for decades doing this. It's just an amazing thing to watch their journey.
That's incredible. Now, what about when it comes to, especially in a situation like church,
Mm-hmm.
where, okay, we have the woman who is now kind of been awakened to the fact that she may be experiencing something that is not normal marital conflict. What happens with her husband in this instance?
Right.
Like what's the next step there?
Sure. So first thing we're going to do is work with the women, because they're usually the ones asking for the help. And so our free recovery group called Her Journey is offered virtually and in person. So we're always looking for more leaders. So we want to be in every single state, every area that we possibly can be, but we have these virtual options too. So we're going to walk with her, not telling her what to do, but as she seeks God for what God is calling her to do. And usually it starts with setting boundaries. You really can't work very much with him while he's still in the home with her and it's unsafe, but she may start to set some boundaries. And even the boundary of, hey, you need to go to a program that deals with these issues of power and control for us to be able to make it.
Right.
Now, I've seen couples do this while they're still in the same home. The process is slower, but actually separations can be very functional in these relationships, because it helps them to get their focus off of one another. It creates safety for her. It gives her a chance to recognize and watch whether or not he's really truly going to make the changes he's been promising to. And so as we work with the men too, it's important for them to get their focus off of her. And really this focus between them and God. We talk about this a lot in our program, about not focusing outward, but focusing, what is God calling you to do in this situation? What does love look like? And so once we have her in a place of safety, then we can then go and address that. And we're like, we tell pastors, meet with him, and mentor him in the sense of what does love look like, but don't allow him to talk about all the things that his wife is doing, because that doesn't help him.
Yeah.
So we want the pastors to reinforce what we're teaching, which is accountability. And what does love look like? Even if she does have her problems, still, what does love look like in practical behavior? And we're working on belief systems that these men hold that give them permission to behave the way they're behaving. We also work
That was actually my next question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, we also work with women who use abuse as well, and we do very similar work with them. Yeah.
So, and that's great, because it's not always, men
Right.
in the positions of abuser and women as the abused. But my question is also, from either aspect, men or women, do you find that it's often a family thing, something that is generational, that they've seen this behavior modeled in others? Have you ever come across someone who does exhibit abusive behaviors, but did not come from that kind of environment? And where does it come from?
Sure. Well, yes, I think that most abuse is something that is generational. Most of the men that we serve would say they witnessed or experienced abuse growing up in some form or fashion, or they were bullied in their youth or adolescence. So we asked our men years ago, we took kind of a poll and we said, what age were you when you first started using abusive behaviors? And the average age was 11, as we define it. So we define it very broadly. We don't just talk about hitting. It's much more about the verbal, psychological forms of abuse. And of the men that we asked this question to, there was only a couple who had not grown up in a home where abuse was present. They just found that around that age that it worked for them. If abuse didn't work, no one would be using it. So they start bullying and they get what they want. And they find that,
wow.
and you do it long enough, it becomes a pattern for you. It becomes a way of life for you. So again, if abuse didn't work, no one would be using it.
Yeah. People can be transformed, right? God has this incredible ability to transform the hearts of people. Can you tell me an example of a situation that you've been in where you have, and I'm sure you have many, where you have seen how God moves in this transformative place for people through your ministry?
Absolutely. I think it's what keeps them. I'll start with the women. I'll talk about the men too. But I think that's why our leaders stay for so long. We have leaders who've been leading for 2 decades, and
Wow.
it's because we see the transformation on a week by week basis. So I had a woman come in. She looked like, she was so pale. She looked like she was dying, and not from physical abuse, but from the emotional and verbal abuse that she'd been experiencing for years.
Wow.
Her friends were bringing her because she was so frail, so thin. She wouldn't speak in group at all. It's not a process group, so the women can just sit and listen, but we take prayer requests at the end. She would never give more than a 1-word prayer request kind of thing. I remember when she started driving herself. That was a really big deal. And then her husband actually physically pushed her down and broke her tailbone. Then he taunted her and said she would never call the police, and she called the police for the first time ever in 22 years of marriage.
Wow.
And the police came, but they were friends with them. So they just made him leave for the night. And they were out in the garage joking and stuff. And she, though, had gained enough of herself where she went down. Her friends took her down to get a restraining order or protection order, depending on what state you're in. And she was able to get free. It was really messy for a while, which happens. But I saw her like 2 years later. She came in to volunteer in the office. I didn't even recognize her.
Oh, wow.
Her whole countenance had changed. The way she looked changed. Completely. I didn't recognize her. And even though during that time she had lost contact with her sons because the abuser had kind of worked his way, and her sons were teenagers. One was a young adult, one was 17, and the 17-year-old was more like her, so he had to go with his father's way in order to keep the peace. But they had come back, and God had reunited them together, and it was just a beautiful story of God's
Oh,
faithfulness and all the heartache that she'd been through to see God working in her life. And then for our men, to watch them, they're on a spectrum. So you have some guys who, come a few weeks, they don't make any change, they quit or they get released. And then you have guys on the very other side of the spectrum who work very hard, look for
mm,
accountability on multiple sides. So they're seeing a counselor for their childhood trauma, which is what we suggest. And they're
mm.
meeting with a mentor, and they're coming into group. So they're doing multiple things to get accountability. And they're being very honest with themselves and with others about the choices they've made and how they've impacted others. And it's so freeing. I had like 3 men all in 1 week tell me how freeing it was for them, even though they weren't happy about being here initially,
Yeah.
but how much it set them free. And even if their marriages didn't make it, I have one couple who I know really well they have a very healthy marriage because of him going through the program, because of his first relationship. And our women share that even if they don't make it, the sharing of the children is so much improved. He's not using the children as pawns, which is great for the children, even if we
Yes.
can't save the relationship. But we do have those relationships that make it. I've had guys call me back 20 years later and say, Stacy, I'm still working the program. We had a rough year, but I'm using the tools you gave me. And it's just so encouraging to hear that, because we don't always know after they finish. But one thing we have been doing is we've been checking our statistics on our court mandated men, because we receive them voluntarily, court mandated through DHS. And in across the nation, nationwide, for men who complete programs like ours, there's a 50% recidivism, meaning that 50% of them within 5 years will be rearrested for domestic violence.
Wow.
And we've been checking our numbers since 2011, and we're running at consistently 5% or less. And
Wow.
so God is in this. It doesn't mean that they've stopped all their forms of behavior, because psychological can be one of those trickier ones,
Oh,
and
yes.
verbal. But it's something, right? And it's not perfect, because we have some guys who do their very best to trick us, and sometimes do. But we have a lot of victim survivor contact, and so we get to always have our feet really grounded on what's going on in the real world, because they may behave perfectly for us, but they're going home and being abusive to their wives still, verbally and emotionally to them. So, and by the way, the women that we've worked with over probably 50,000 women.
Wow.
They would all say that the psychological or emotional abuse is the worst form of abuse, because while physical abuse is dangerous, illegal, scary, those wounds heal much quicker than those psychological, emotional wounds that are very deep and hard to work through. But we serve a God who doesn't say, I've come that you might survive life. No,
Right.
his word says, I've come that you might live life and live it abundantly. He doesn't call us survivors, he calls us conquerors. And
Amen.
so that's where we want the women to move. Like, there is a point when you're experiencing abuse, you're a victim. Then when you get away from it, you're a survivor. But to stand and just survive is not what God's called us to. And it doesn't need to be a life sentence. God wants you to experience the full wholeness. It's a part of your story, but it's not what defines you.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Fantastic. Oh. So, what are some examples of churches or ministries who have brought in this program? So do you work with churches directly who have can you give us an example of what you've seen in these churches where they've taken on this program and how it's helped with their congregations?
Yeah. Our women who train with us, they look for a place to lead. So sometimes their own church won't allow them to lead there. So then they go to another church. And what's so great about that, it is really for the entire community, because even if the church is offering it, the women in that church may not want to go to that particular group because they
Right.
want to stay anonymous. And so when you open up multiple groups in the area, then the women can go and it becomes a safe place. So those women who've stepped away from church, who come to her journey, who find it a safe place within the church, often end up reconnecting sometimes, and a lot of times, with that very church that has opened their doors to it. So I would really want those churches that are holding our programs, if possible, to receive some training, because if they make it safe, women will come forward.
Yeah.
If they make it safe, men will come forward and say, I'm struggling with this. But if the culture is to support secrecy or support male privilege, then it's not going to be a safe place for the
Yeah.
women to come forward. So a lot of times I've had to go through the back door through the women's ministry to get things going, but that's okay. We'll go in any way that we can. And
That's right.
we're in a lot of pregnancy centers, Union Gospel Rescue Missions, prisons, recovery homes,
That's
and just
great.
and just individuals who've been willing to offer it in their own community.
That's outstanding. I find that there I think with any type of recovery style program, you kind of feel that. I'm a Celebrate Recovery certified
Mhm.
leader. And, we did all the training and we brought it to, a church that I was involved in years ago. We were so excited because we were like, oh, people are going to come. Like everyone needs recovery, right? And no, it was like, oh, no, we're here for those people. Like, no, it's actually for you too.
Mhm.
And they just weren't ready to
Yeah,
share with the people that they serve with every week. And
yeah.
it's like, okay, I do understand that. But there were so few. Rhode Island, I'm from Rhode Island, which is the smallest state in a very small community of humans
Mhm.
that seem to all know everyone.
Mhm.
So it didn't quite take off here because it was so close and everyone is so
Mhm.
small and people were just so hesitant to
Yeah.
share. So there was a women's recovery house that was right down the street. So we would pick those ladies up and they had these incredible stories of survival.
Mhm.
And so people would feel like, oh, yes, we will go in support of these poor ladies who have gone through this, not looking at the issues that they have and how this program can help them.
Yes.
So it was like, oh, how do we get this? And we just couldn't quite get
Mhm.
there. So I can see how this could be a tough
Yeah.
go for people within their body. But I love that you have 50,000 people,
Hmm.
taking part in this,
Yeah.
and having so many options for people to be able to do it online is also another place
Hmm.
where people can experience some safety and some anonymity. And
Hmm.
I think that is an important piece.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting that it's just, I get it. I understand why they're hesitant and stuff, but, we have women who will come to support another person, because we allow women to bring a female support friend. And that person who came to attend the group doesn't stay, but the person who came to support them goes, "Oh my gosh, this is my life." And
Yeah.
they're the one who end up going through it. Or women like myself who didn't experience abuse come into the program and find healing from other things, because God's truth is the truth no matter how the pain came. And
Amen.
it's so anointed. The program is just so anointed that it just touches everybody's heart and mind. I mean, myself included. I lead this over and over again, and God still uses it to speak to me.
Oh, I
And
love that.
and our leaders, they would say the same thing. And I go to class tonight, and I'm like, of course it's going to be that lesson tonight, because that's the one I need tonight.
Right.
So
We just call them spotlight sermons. It's like,
yeah,
oh, they're just
yeah,
talking to me today.
yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when you're dealing with people in a survivor recovery space,
Mhm,
I find that sometimes there is a real resistance to forgiveness with very good reason.
mhm,
How do you handle that with, knowing what we know as women of
mhm,
faith, how forgiveness plays such a huge role in that?
mhm.
But for people who aren't from a faith background, or people who have experienced abuse or hardship, how do you broach that topic of forgiveness when people can be so hurt?
Yeah. I think this crosses lines to both faith-based and non-faith-based.
Yeah.
We One of our lessons, because there's 15 lessons that we just rotate through so women can join at any time. But one of our lessons is called the F word, for forgiveness.
Oh, I love it.
And so we spend a great deal of time talking about what forgiveness isn't, because within the faith community, women are often told just to forgive and let it go and pretend like it never happened, like they fixed it by having them forgive. But it didn't stop the abuse. In fact, they sent her back home, and the abuse is now worse than it was before.
Mm,
So we spend time talking about what forgiveness isn't, and how it doesn't mean you can still forgive a person and have healthy boundaries. You can still forgive a person and hold them accountable for the consequences of their choices, because that is actually biblical. Jesus says in his
yes.
word that God disciplines those he considers a son or child. And it says why? It says because it will produce a life of righteousness. He tells us
Amen.
why to do that. So, I think that forgiveness topic, what we say to the women let's say they're coming in, that's our very first group, because they don't have to wait to week 1 when they start with us. And that's our very first group they're coming into, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, but God knows what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And I just say, hey, if you're not ready, this is just one piece of healing. This isn't the whole healing process. But if you want to finish your healing process, at some point you're going to need to deal with this. But for right now, if that's not where you're at, you shelf it.
Yeah.
And you hang on to this information. When it's time, God will show you. One of my favorite stories is a gal who was our very first speaker at our very first banquet, and she had been sexually abused by her brother and his friends for years. And they
Oh, wow.
finally got him removed from the home at Christmas time. He got to come home, cornered her in the kitchen, told her that she still belonged to him. She grabbed a knife. Dad walked in. Anyways, she stood in front of this group with her lips quivering, talking about how this one lesson called the F word that she hates, that's about forgiveness. But she says after going through it 3 times, she says, I was able to be in a room with him and feel no negative feelings towards him.
Amen.
She had freedom. It has nothing to do with the other person. We talk
That's
about
right.
that.
It's
It's
freedom for her.
yes, yes. And so just an amazing story. So actually I think we do a really good job of this. We also talk about it in our men's program, and about, because a lot of our men who use abuse hang on to unforgiveness, and that keeps them from moving forward in having healthy relationships. So we talk about that as well.
And forgiveness, I would imagine, for perpetrators, it could be, sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to, like, saying, okay, when you know better, you do better. But in this space, like, maybe I can't get over the things that I've done, when you
Mhm.
realize just what you've done. Because I think that
Right.
sometimes people may not, and not maliciously, they may not understand the magnitude of what they're doing. But when
Right.
they get that realization of, goodness, this is what I've done,
Mhm.
how do you forgive yourself in that
Right.
moment has to be also a challenge.
It is. I think that when we talk about, we have them like hold up how many fingers of how many hold up how many fingers of people that you have not forgiven, and they'll hold up, 3 or 10, and then we make them for the rest of the class hold these blocks of wood, the entire class without resting their arms, hold them the entire class long. And as we're talking about this unforgiveness that they're holding on to, it usually starts with family, people who have hurt them, maybe someone who's a partner who cheated on them at some point. But our men say that they feel pretty horrible about themselves when they first start attending group, because it's really in their face, because we
Mm.
hold them really highly accountable. And for the first 3 months, actually, it's kind of like that. But the guys who've been there longer will tell the newer guys, hang in there, because one of the most common things I hear from the men when they finish is that they have grown in self-respect. And so they've learned to work on that forgiveness so that they can feel good about the choices they're making now. They can't change the past, but they can be accountable for it, and not just apologize, but change their behaviors. And that only
Yes.
comes by changing belief systems. And I believe that we can't do that without God's help. We really do need God's help to change those deep-seated beliefs that we hold on to, that we're not even really aware of. And most of the men aren't even really aware of that the behaviors that they have been doing are abusive. Most of the men don't think of it as abuse.
I believe that. I mean, aside from like physical abuse
Mm-hmm.
or sexual abuse, and sometimes maybe even sexual abuse, they may
Yep.
not feel like this is a thing.
Yeah.
But I think that, psychological abuse and the way that people speak to other people, and I think that sometimes they really just do not understand the weight of words and the
Right.
magnitude that these statements that can sometimes be flippantly made are like daggers into people. But if
Right.
you don't recognize that as that, then
Mm.
you don't even realize just how much you're hurting another person. So to be
Absolutely.
confronted with that
Yeah.
has to be a lot.
Yeah, we think about verbal abuse, and if you've grown up in the church, you've heard that, the tongue has the power of life and death. And I've
Mm,
heard that forever, but never really give it much thought until one of our men shared about Dr. Moto, who's a Japanese doctor who did a study on water. And when he would speak love to water, it had positive, and he would freeze it, and he'd have a positive response when he spoke hate. And then he did like rice and water. Anyways, the whole point was that when he spoke love to rice and water, after 30 days, it smelled like sweet and almost fermented. The rice was still white. Spoke hate to the one, and the rice was all black. And he ignored the other altogether, and the rice was black and mold was growing on top. But the point this guy made to me, and it was so impactful to me in understanding how the word of God is so true. He made the comment, he goes, our bodies are made up of more than 70% water. And so here, this is just rice and water, but we are living beings that are made up of mostly water.
amen.
And I just feel like science just keeps proving the word to be true. Life and death really are in the power of the tongue. And we all should be working harder to speak life to one another.
Amen. Amen. Oh, so what is your prayer and hope for the future of faith-based abuse recovery ministries?
Well, I would love to see like our recovery groups in every county in every state. When we're international, like I said, we're in 7 countries. We have it translated into 5 languages right now. We just want to see it spread. We want to train more people to lead. It's volunteer leaders who are leading this, so we can train them via over the internet, 'cause it's all online. But I also want to see our men's intervention and our women's intervention programs spread to like some Union Gospel Rescue missions, or recovery homes where they have long-term care, so they have enough
Yeah.
time to get, because it's a long program.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't quite been able to convince them that it's worth the time and effort, but it's great to get somebody into a house and get them off drugs and alcohol and bring them to Christ. But if you don't deal with their relationships, they're just a mess still, because they don't have any other tools to use.
Amen.
And so I would love to be able to see a way for us to teach what we're doing and have other people replicate it in their area. And because I know it's so needed, and it's such a powerful tool. And the men's groups are male-female co-facilitated, which we believe in that model very strongly. And that's the way our state requires it, but it is the best model to use. But even working with the women, I'm really passionate about the intervention work too, because I think that if all we're doing is helping those who are falling off the cliff and not stopping those who are doing the pushing of those off the cliff, then we're not really solving completely the problem the way it should be. So, and I really love working with this clientele, the women who come in, who are oftentimes, maybe it might be both parties are being abusive to each other, but she got caught up in the court systems and got sent to us. But the freedom and the empowerment that these women feel, I know that sounds so like not Christian, but really it is empowering when you realize that you have control of yourself. God gave us self-control. And for them to gain some tools that they couldn't learn anywhere else, but with what we have to give them. And again, I count it such an honor to walk alongside people in their healing journey, whether it's recovering or whether it's transforming, but whatever God is calling them to do. And I love doing trainings for churches and staff and the faith community, just so they can grasp it. But it is a heavy topic to talk about. I try to put jokes in there, Regina, but you can only do so much when it comes to domestic violence.
Tell me. There was a speechwriter so as a speaker, it's one of my favorite quotes. It's like, in every situation, you have to have some charity, clarity, levity, and brevity. Those are the big four. And it's like, I talk about, anxiety, abuse, all kinds of things, addictions. And you kind of have to have some levity in there, or people, you're going to lose them. And it's like, you don't want it to just be like,
yeah. I can feel it. So I'll stop in the middle and go, okay, time for a joke.
Let's pick it back up.
Pick it back up. It's like, and to give them hope, the fact that we're able to gather several hundred people for a domestic violence event is pretty amazing. And the reason that we're able to do this is because people who've experienced what we have offered, either their friend or family member have gone through it, or they've gone through it, and they invite their friends to come, is because there's so much hope in the work that we do. If there wasn't, Regina, I would not have survived the 27 and a half years that I've been doing this. I would not have. And why do it?
Work that's going on.
Yeah. I would love to work myself out of a job. That would be the absolute.
Wouldn't that be perfect?
That would be great. But I think Jesus is going to come before that. So
right. Well, Stacy, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the tips that you shared. I'm going to have all of your information in the show notes of this episode, because you are doing something vitally important. And God has used your abilities and your gifts, your talents, and your skills to put forth something that is necessary and incredible. And for 27 years, you have been doing this phenomenal work. So it has been an honor and a privilege to talk to you today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope to have you back on again. I'd love to chat with you more, okay?
Absolutely.
Grace for every heart, refreshing souls are set apart. Come to the well, receive His light, living water,